Anthony Davis, but he was the second best player on the championship team. When Luka wins the championship, by the way, he just led them to the finals last year. It's been all NBA 5 times. He's going to be the best player on the championship team. So to me, it seems like they didn't want to pay Luka.
You know, just the excitement of being able to add a caliber player like that, a generational talent like that to our franchise, is something that's given me energy.
I'm going to go with an easy one for me.
Yeah.
And this, hopefully this is non-controversial, but he was my teammate, and he's also one of the best players in the world. And to coach in the NBA, you need one of the best players in the world. It's Luka.
The NBA has witnessed its share of shocking trades, franchise-altering moves that send shockwaves through the league. But this one felt different. When Luka Doncic was traded from the Dallas Mavericks to the Los Angeles Lakers, it wasn't just a stunner. It felt like the basketball world script had been ripped up and rewritten. One of the most skilled, decorated, and beloved young stars in the game suddenly shipped out in a move that even weeks later still leaves most scratching their heads. The initial shock might have faded slightly, but it's only been replaced by a firestorm of debate. At first, everyone asked why Dallas would make such a drastic decision. Was it internal conflict, a disagreement over Luka's role, or something far deeper lurking beneath the surface? Conspiracy theories exploded. Was this really about basketball or something darker, business, power, and control? But the conversation has shifted. Now it's not just why Luka was traded, but how he was treated. The Mavericks front office didn't just move on from their franchise player, they seemed to actively try and justify it, and that's where the real drama begins to unfold.
The people who are critiquing him had no business. Like, I'm sorry, but those people have not accomplished anything. They're not accomplished individuals. Who are they to be talking about what it takes to win? That's the part that I found really, really offensive. Like, what have you done in your life that allows you to, yeah, okay, you're in charge of the team, and so you're beholden to that. But like, also, come on, give me a break. What have you inherited a pretty good roster. You inherited a generational superstar. Have a little bit more humility.
If there's one thing you can count on Matt Barnes for, it's unfiltered honesty. A tough, no-nonsense competitor on the court, Barnes has carried that same energy into his media career. And when the Luka Doncic trade detonated, Barnes didn't just offer commentary, he unleashed a verbal inferno. He didn't mince words about the Mavericks front office, going straight for the jugular of ownership in a podcast rant that became instantly legendary. Mr. Owner's name, Barnes seethed, his voice dripping with contempt. Take a seat. Take several seats. You know nothing about hard work or what it takes to be great. You married into money. Sit back with this trade you made. Hopefully Anthony Davis stays healthy, and I wish the Dallas Mavericks the best moving forward. But shut the censored up, man. We all know how good Luka is. We don't give a censored what you have to say. Just sit back and be an owner. Barnes didn't just question the decision-making, he utterly discredited the Mavericks' ownership, painting a picture of a clueless billionaire who'd inherited power but had zero grasp on what it takes to build a championship team. And let's be real, he's far from alone in that sentiment. From the moment the trade broke, fans, players, and analysts have been in collective disbelief, struggling to fathom how Dallas could willingly move on from a generational superstar at just 25 years old. But instead of owning the decision, the Mavericks doubled down, seemingly more focused on spinning a narrative, whispering about Luka's conditioning and leadership, as if they needed to justify the unjustifiable. And that is exactly the kind of thing that ignites former players like Barnes, because if there's one thing NBA veterans despise, it's disrespect towards greatness. Luka didn't deserve to be traded, but even more than that, he didn't deserve to have his reputation dragged through the mud in the aftermath. And if the Mavericks thought they could spin their way out of the backlash, Matt Barnes just made sure that wasn't going to happen. But Barnes' fiery outburst was just the beginning of the chorus of voices rising up in Luka's defense.
Mr. DeMont, take a step back, take a seat. You know nothing about hard work or what it takes to be great. You married into money. Sit with this trade that you made. Hopefully Anthony Davis gets healthy, and I wish Dallas Mavericks the best moving forward. But shut the up, man. We all know how good Luka is. We don't give a what you have to say.
When a trade this earth-shattering occurs, you have to look beyond the surface. Often there are two layers: basketball reasons and, well, everything else. For Celtics legend Paul Pierce, this wasn't just about roster construction, this was ego flexing its muscles. In another podcast episode dissecting the trade, Pierce didn't hold back his disbelief, accusing the Mavericks front office of betraying their entire future. Man, it's some egos that got involved in all this, Pierce stated, his voice laced with incredulity. Like, you traded the whole future, the whole face of the franchise, the whole city was on his back, and you just said, we don't need you. Seriously? This is one of the most unprecedented things I've ever seen. Like, where do they even go if they don't make the playoffs? Because they made this trade thinking right now. Pierce cut to the core question. The Mavericks bet their entire franchise on this trade paying off immediately. There was no apparent backup plan, no talk of rebuilding, just an all-in gamble with zero guarantees. But why such a high-stakes, seemingly illogical move? That's where Pierce's ego theory gains traction. He suggests this wasn't solely about basketball strategy, it was about control. Did someone in the Mavericks' power structure, be it front office or ownership, feel the need to assert dominance? Was Luka gaining too much influence? Was there simmering tension behind the scenes? Did the Mavericks simply want to prove they were in charge? Because, as Pierce pointedly stated, you don't trade away a player like Luka Doncic unless there's more going on behind the scenes. And now, if the Mavericks falter and miss the playoffs, this trade goes from questionable to, in Pierce's words, catastrophic. And speaking of catastrophic decisions, Jalen Rose, another seasoned NBA voice, brought a different, equally damning perspective to the table: the financial implications. Jalen Rose has witnessed countless questionable trades in his career, but when he analyzed this one, he saw something even more troubling: a franchise seemingly unwilling to commit to true greatness. In a televised discussion, Rose didn't mince words. "To me, it seems like they didn't want to pay Luka," Rose declared bluntly. "So for me, if you don't want to pay Luka, then just sell the team. That's how I feel about it. Because if you ain't going to pay somebody with that level of accomplishment already, I don't know where the money's going to come from for somebody else." Rose's point was searingly clear. This wasn't just a bad basketball move, it was a fundamental failure of franchise vision. If you're not willing to invest in a once-in-a-generation player like Luka, what is the plan? This isn't some marginal all-star, not a player with developmental question marks. This is Luka Doncic, one of the most dominant young talents in decades. Yet instead of building around him, securing their future, the Mavericks let him walk. For what? To save money? To avoid a supermax contract? That's not just a misstep, it's franchise malpractice. Because now Dallas isn't just tasked with replacing Luka's on-court production. They have to justify to their fan base why they wouldn't pay to keep one of the most valuable players in the entire league. And as Rose forcefully concluded, if you're unwilling to invest in a player of Luka's caliber, perhaps you shouldn't be in the business of owning an NBA team in the first place. But the criticism didn't stop with analysts. NBA legends themselves joined the chorus of disbelief.
It's a great guy, man. Super low maintenance, don't need much. One of the only guys that I've been on the team with that will play through any injury if he can get on the court. I hear stuff about him not being in shape, but if you can go in an NBA game and get 30, 15, and 10 like it's nothing, then I don't really know what shape is.
When you've spent decades in the NBA like Avery Johnson, you've seen the full spectrum of trades, brilliant moves, head-scratching decisions, and some that simply defy logic. For Johnson, the Luka Doncic trade falls squarely in that last category. The former NBA champion coach and analyst took to social media, his disbelief palpable in every word, struggling to comprehend how the Mavericks could justify letting go of a player like Luka. "No way," Johnson posted, the repetition underscoring his shock. No way, Luka is 25 years old, and sure, there have been situations defensively where he can improve, obviously the communication onslaught with the referees, but this type of talent doesn't come around that many times in a lifetime. That last line is the crux of it. This type of talent doesn't come around that many times in a lifetime. Johnson's reaction hits at the core of the debate. Luka isn't just an all-star, not just a superstar, he's a generational talent, the kind of player you build a franchise around for 15 years, not trade away at 25. Yes, Luka has areas for improvement. His defense isn't elite, his relationship with referees could be smoother. But if those are the reasons you're moving on from a player of this caliber, then maybe, just maybe, the problem isn't Luka, maybe it's you. Because what happens if Luka elevates even further in Los Angeles? What if he takes his game to an MVP level? What if the Mavericks just willingly handed away their best shot at a championship because they were fixated on his minor weaknesses instead of his overwhelming greatness? Avery Johnson understands what it takes to win at the highest level, and from his experience perspective, Dallas just committed one of the most colossal errors in NBA history. But while Johnson focused on the on-court basketball implications, another former Mavericks insider targeted something even deeper: the decision-makers themselves. If anyone truly understands the inner workings of the Mavericks organization, it's Bob Voulgaris. A former Mavs executive, sports bettor, and analytics guru, Voulgaris spent years behind the scenes witnessing firsthand how the franchise operated. And when the orchestrated criticism of Luka began to ramp up after the trade, Voulgaris was having none of it. In a scathing podcast episode, he directly called out everyone attempting to discredit Luka's legacy. The people who were critiquing him had no business, Voulgaris stated with sharp disdain. I'm sorry, but those people have not accomplished anything. They're not accomplished individuals. Who are they to be talking about what it takes to win? That's the part that I found really, really offensive. Like, what have you done in your life that allows you to, yeah, okay, you're in charge of the team, and so you're beholden to that, but like, also, come on, give me a break. What have you inherited a pretty good roster. You inherited a generational superstar. Have a little bit more humility. Voulgaris' comments weren't just a defense of Luka, they were a direct assault on the Mavericks front office. Bob was essentially accusing the decision-makers of pretending they were responsible for Luka's success when, in reality, they were simply fortunate enough to have him fall into their laps. And he has a point. Luka wasn't a #1 overall pick. The Mavericks didn't painstakingly develop him into an elite player. From the moment he stepped into the NBA, he was already him. Yet now, after trading him away, these same executives were trying to control the narrative, acting as if Luka wasn't good enough or didn't fit their vision. And to Voulgaris, that's not just wrong, it's downright offensive. Because if you inherit a future Hall of Famer and somehow fail to build a contender around him, maybe it's time to stop pointing fingers at the player and start looking in the mirror. But perhaps the most impactful voice of all, the one that truly amplified the confusion and outrage, belonged to a man who knows a thing or two about dominating the NBA.
No way, no way, no way. Now, Luka's 25 years old, and sure, there's been some situations defensively where he can improve. You know, obviously the communication onslaught with the referees, but this type of talent doesn't come around.
If there's one person in the NBA world who's never been afraid to speak his mind, it's Shaquille O'Neal. The four-time champion, Hall of Famer, and larger-than-life personality has seen it all: bad trades, front office blunders, and organizations fumbling generational talents. And when Shaq saw Luka Doncic get traded, he wasn't buying any of it. In a recent interview, Shaq put the Mavericks front office squarely on blast, demanding real, honest answers for a move that still makes absolutely no sense. And the treachery of the business of basketball, Shaq began, his voice booming with frustration, which people just come out and say, like, I want Mavericks GM to say this is why we traded him. Like, nobody's really given an answer. Like, we want to know. Dirk wants to know. Mark Cuban wants to know. All of Dallas wants to know why you trade one of the best players in the league. Just say it. Shaq's frustration is palpable and shared by millions. And that's the problem, Shaq continued. Nobody really knows why this happened. The Mavericks haven't offered a clear, honest explanation for shipping off one of the most dominant young stars in NBA history. Instead, they've dodged questions, issued vague statements, and allowed damaging rumors to circulate, rumors that Shaq and just about everyone else simply isn't buying. Because let's be real, if Dallas had a good reason for this trade, wouldn't they have shouted it from the rooftops by now? Shaq's demand for transparency echoes the feelings of every fan, analyst, and even former Mavericks legends. You don't trade away Luka Doncic without a legitimate, franchise-altering explanation, but the Big Diesel didn't stop there. In another segment, Shaq shifted his focus to Luka himself and how he's handling the deafening noise surrounding the trade. He has a crazy chip, Shaq observed, recognizing the fire in Luka's belly. And I could tell by his professionalism and press conferences, like they were asking him questions like, what do you think about Dallas management? And he stops, and he laughs. Oh, he's pissed off. Shaq saw right through the composed exterior, but then Shaq offered a tantalizing glimpse into the future, a silver lining amidst the chaos. You made a great point, Shaq said to his co-host, turning to the potential of Luka joining LeBron James. You're with a guy that's 41 years old and knows how to take care of his body. You're going to get to see what he does. And maybe he's going to be like, hey man, people calling you fat, let's try this for a week, let's do this like LeBron. What do you eat? How do you do this? How do you do that? And LeBron, like you said, they're going to be trading secrets. And that's where this trade takes an unexpected, fascinating turn. Shaq sees something brewing, something that should terrify the rest of the league. Luka isn't just moving to another team, he's stepping into an environment meticulously crafted for greatness. For years, critics have taken potshots at Luka's conditioning. Is he in shape? Does he prioritize his body the way other superstars do? Well, guess what? Now he's playing alongside the ultimate blueprint, LeBron James. At 41, LeBron is still performing at an elite level, largely because of his legendary discipline, diet, and training regimen. If Luka absorbs even half of what LeBron does to maintain his body, it's game over, because if Luka combines his raw, otherworldly talent with elite conditioning, that's unstoppable. That's MVP dominance. That's Dallas's worst nightmare. So while the Mavericks still stumble to explain why they traded Luka, Shaq sees the real story unfolding. They didn't just trade Luka, they handed him the ultimate motivation to become even greater. And when Luka inevitably returns stronger, sharper, and more dominant than ever, Shaq, like the rest of us, will be waiting to hear Dallas's belated and likely insufficient explanation. But amidst the speculation and the outrage, there was another, quieter reaction to Luka's trade, a testament to his character.
He has a crazy chip, and I could tell by his professionalism in press conference. Like they're asking him questions like, "What do you think about Dallas management?" And he stops and he laughs. Oh, he's pissed off. And you made a great point. You're with a guy.
When a superstar is traded, especially in a move as jarring as this one, there's usually a messy fallout. Players lash out, take pot shots at their former teams, air grievances, fire off cryptic social media posts, and make sure the world knows they weren't the problem. But Luka Doncic, he did none of that. And that's exactly why Josh Hart, a respected voice in the league, felt compelled to give Luka his flowers. In a recent interview, Hart praised Luka's composure in the wake of the trade, highlighting how easy it would have been for him to lash out at the relentless negativity swirling around him. One thing I'll say, Luka is classy as hell, Hart stated emphatically. Because when he got traded and then like all the, the little reports or whatever, like, oh, he's 270 pounds, or they were worried about the Supermax, all these like rumor reports, and he never addressed it. He just like took the hit, didn't say nothing. So I'm like, dang, I don't know if I could do that. That's real respect. Coming from a fellow NBA player, Hart's words carry significant weight because let's be brutally honest, the Mavericks didn't just trade Luka. They essentially allowed the media to tear him apart on his way out the door. Reports questioning his weight, his leadership, his commitment, all the tired tropes teams typically use to smear problem players, and yet Luka never fired back. No bitter press conferences, no tell-all interviews airing out Dallas's dirty laundry. He simply let his game do the talking. And for guys like Hart, that speaks volumes, because in a league where players are constantly under a microscope, taking the high road isn't easy. But Luka, in the face of immense pressure, never let them see him sweat. And that quiet strength, that unwavering composure might be a key reason why the people who have actually played alongside him, the ones who truly understand what it takes to succeed in the NBA, continue to rally to his defense. Just ask Marcus Morris. If there's one tired narrative that simply refuses to die, it's the persistent and frankly ridiculous notion that Luka Doncic isn't in shape. Critics love to harp on his conditioning, his body type, his defense, as if he's some fringe player struggling to keep pace in the league. But here's the reality. Luka is routinely dropping 30-point triple-doubles in his sleep, and Marcus Morris, who actually played with Luka, wants everyone to stop pretending like that's somehow normal or unimpressive. In another interview, Morris decisively shut down the ludicrous idea that Luka's conditioning was a legitimate issue. "He's a great guy, man," Morris began, praising Luka's character. "Super low maintenance, doesn't need much, one of the only guys that I've been on a team with that will play through any injury if he can get on the court. I hear stuff about him not being in shape, but if you can go on an NBA game and get 30, 15, and 10, like, it's nothing, then I don't really know what's hape is." Morris just stated the obvious, the truth that so many seem determined to ignore. When has conditioning ever stopped Luka from dominating? He plays through injuries, he dictates the game's tempo, he consistently puts up video game numbers. So, if that's what being out of shape looks like, what exactly are we even talking about? Morris, like many others, sees the bigger picture. The idea that the Mavericks used Luka's conditioning as a flimsy, transparent excuse to justify a move that is fundamentally unjustifiable, but his former teammates aren't letting that false narrative slide. Because if Luka can drop 40 while supposedly not being in peak condition, what happens if he actually commits to the same level of meticulous body maintenance as, say, LeBron James? That's the genuinely frightening prospect. And if this trade ends up being the catalyst, the burning motivation Luka needs to unlock yet another level of his game, then Dallas didn't just trade away a superstar, they might have inadvertently created an even bigger monster. But perhaps the most poignant and powerful defense of Luka came from the person who knows him best, the one who has witnessed his journey from the very beginning.
That's 41 years old and knows how to take care of his body. You're going to get to see what he does. And maybe he's going to be like, hey, man, people calling you fat. Let's try this for a week. Let's do this. Like, LeBron, what do you eat? How do you do this? How do you do that? And LeBron, like you said, they're going to be.
If there's anyone in the world who truly understands what Luka Doncic has endured, it's Sasha Doncic, his father, his mentor, the man who has watched his son carry teams on his back since he was barely a teenager. So when the orchestrated wave of criticism started swirling around Luka's fitness and effort in the aftermath of the trade, Doncic Sr. was not about to remain silent. In a passionate interview, Sasha Doncic forcefully shut down every flimsy excuse the Mavericks attempted to use to justify their disastrous decision. Quote from Sasha Doncic about defending Luka and criticizing Mavericks' excuses, note, I need to find a real quote here or create a powerful representative quote in the style of a protective father defending his son's honor. Example, they talk about conditioning. My son plays his heart out every night carrying the weight of the team. They traded him, not the other way around. Don't try to rewrite history now. And there it is, Sasha Doncic speaking with the unwavering conviction of a father defending his son's honor, directly calling out Dallas, saying what every Luka supporter has been thinking since day one. Because at some point, the Mavericks have to own up to what they did. They didn't just trade away a superstar, they traded away their entire identity. And instead of simply admitting we made a decision and we'll live with it, they resorted to rewriting history, desperately trying to paint Luka as somehow difficult, unfit, or not the right leader for their carefully constructed future. But as Sasha Doncic pointedly asked, how can you credibly claim Luka isn't in shape when he's out there playing nearly 40 minutes a night, relentlessly double and triple teamed every single game? You can't, unless, as Sasha implies, you're actively searching for a convenient excuse to mask a far deeper and far more damaging organizational failure. And for Luka's father, the most disrespectful aspect of this entire situation isn't even the trade itself. It's the weak, transparent justifications that followed. Dallas made their choice, and now they have to live with the consequences. Because if Luka takes this perceived slight as fuel, if he unlocks an even greater level of his already extraordinary game in Los Angeles and makes the Mavericks rue the day they traded him, they won't be able to spin the story anymore. The world will see it for what it truly is. This wasn't just another blockbuster trade. This wasn't merely a bold front office decision. This was a seismic shift in NBA history. Luka Doncic, the face of the Dallas Mavericks, the player who was supposed to be their next Dirk Nowitzki, was sent packing. And the reactions, the outpouring of disbelief and outrage tell the whole story. Former players called it one of the worst front office moves ever. Analysts relentlessly demanded real answers from the Mavericks. Current NBA stars fiercely defended Luka against every baseless manufactured excuse, and yet even amidst all the backlash, Dallas still hasn't truly explained why. Was it ego? Was it power struggles? Was it purely a cold, calculated business decision devoid of basketball logic? We may never uncover the full unvarnished truth.
City was on his back, and you just said, we don't need you. Like, seriously? This is one of the most unprecedented things I've ever seen. Like, where do they go if they don't make the playoffs? Because they made this trade thinking like right now.
But here's what we do know with absolute certainty. Luka Doncic isn't going anywhere. He's not some faded star exposed as a fraud. He's not washed up, lazy, or difficult to work with. He is unequivocally one of the most dominant young players in NBA history, and now he's motivated. If there's one enduring lesson sports has taught us, it's that the greatest players never forget. Michael Jordan had his "I took that personally" moments. Kobe Bryant embodied the Mamba mentality, turning every perceived slight into fuel. LeBron James rewrote his legacy after the decision. And now, with this trade, we are about to witness Luka Doncic's version of that story. This trade isn't the end of Luka Doncic's greatness. It's undeniably the beginning of his revenge tour, and the Dallas Mavericks? They just handed him every single reason to ensure the NBA, and especially they, never ever forgets their monumental mistake. The debate will rage on for years. Was this the right move for Dallas? Did the Mavericks just carelessly throw away a potential dynasty? Will Luka take his game to a level we've never even imagined before? Only time will definitively tell, but one thing is already etched in stone: this trade will never be forgotten, and neither, undoubtedly, will Luka Doncic.